Hello friends, today we are going to speak about the concept and role of mutual funds. Before that, I will just like to make you aware of one thing very important is, in this globalized environment, when the banks are emerging as financial supermarkets, they look out for bringing in more and more products in their gamut so that all the services are provided under one roof. Now, why is it required? Because as we all know, the net interest income for all the banks with increasing competition is shrinking down, and that's the reason it becomes vital for them to have some other sources of income, and mutual funds are really a good source wherein they help them to get more and more fee-based income. With that, let us start with the introduction of mutual funds. Now, what is a mutual fund, friends? Mutual funds, it's a pool of money collected from the investors and is invested according to certain investment objective. Now, to make this statement clear, I will just like to explain you with an example. Now, let us talk about an individual, Mr. A. He has a surplus from his income of rupees 10,000 in a month. His risk appetite is pretty good, and that's the reason he is keen to invest in the equity market. As we all know, equity being a very volatile market, there is a lot of risk involved in the investment. So, he would love to do his investments in the equity market. But then, since the amount which is there at his disposal is pretty less, what will happen is, if he goes to the equity directly, there will be a lot of transaction charges, transaction costs that will be levied, and over and above that, he might be able to just invest in one or two securities, right? He might be able to invest only in either one or two of the companies, and then what happens is he has to rely on the performance of these two companies for getting good returns. Now, this is something wherein he will have a hedge. Why? Because the amount is meager, and with this meager amount, when he goes directly to the equity market, his exposure is not that great, his returns cannot be that great. So, there is another route through which he can definitely enter the equity market, which is called as a mutual fund. Now, what is a mutual fund, friends? We said it is a pool of money from various investors. Now, there might be similar people like Mr. A who are having meager savings with them, and they are also interested in getting an exposure in the equity market. Then what they can do is, they can come up together, they can join hands and make a pool, right? So, what Mr. A will do, in fact, people similar to Mr. A, all are going to pool their funds in this mutual fund. So, what happens is, now everyone is going to contribute rupees 10,000, rupees 10,000, rupees 10,000. So, it is going to come from n number of people who are interested in investing in the markets, in the capital markets. So, rather than going directly through the mutual fund route. So, mutual fund is a pool of money wherein all the investors come together, they generate a pool, and then the pool of funds are directed towards the capital markets. Is it clear, friends? So, when we say mutual funds, it is just an indirect route of getting an exposure in the capital market. Why? Because your savings are meager. If you go directly, you might not get that good returns, you might not be able to diversify your portfolio. In that context, mutual funds can be a better source of investment. So, the ownership of the fund is thus joint or mutual. The fund belongs to the investors. We cannot say that we are lending it to someone. We cannot say that we are lending it to the mutual fund house, right? It is a joint ownership. All these people who have contributed to the pool are the joint owners, and that's the reason we say it's a mutual ownership with all these participants or all these unit holders, right? So, we cannot say that the mutual fund is the owner of this funds and he can play with the funds as per his whims and fancies. He definitely has to consider the objective, right, of these investors who are the owners of these funds, right? The funds belongs to these owners, to these investors, and when the funds are belonging to these investors, they have to be channelized in the similar fashion in which they are comfortable. It has to consider the objective of all these investors who have created the pool. So, the objective, the purpose of investment of all these investors taken together will help the mutual fund to decide where they are going to channelize, where they are going to allocate the funds which they have collected through this mutual fund route. So, that is what is the definition of a mutual fund. So, the important characteristics of the mutual fund are the ownership of the mutual fund is in the hands of the investors who have pooled in their funds. So, it is joint or mutual. So, the word mutual says that the ownership is with the investors who have created the pool. It is managed by a team of investment professionals and other service providers. Now, friends, when I say that Mr. A is going to directly go to the market, it might happen that he will not have the expertise. He might land up choosing a wrong company, a wrong investment, because he doesn't have the expertise. He doesn't have, he is not aware of the intricacies of the market, right? In such a scenario, what happens is he might land up doing wrong investments, right? So, in this case, mutual funds can be a boon to him. Why? Because they are being managed by investment professionals. They are the experts. They are into the market. They know about the intricacies of the market. They know when to enter and when to exit from the market. Since they have the professionalism, they have the expertise, it becomes really easy for them to route the funds in the right manner, in the right investments. The pool of funds is invested in a portfolio of marketable instruments. Very important is liquidity. Friends, we already have talked about the objectives of doing an investment. So, when an investor looks out for doing any investment, he has certain objectives. What are the objectives? He is looking for good returns. He is concerned about the security of his principal. He doesn't want to take that good risk. And thirdly, the foremost thing which he would like to have is liquidity. So, he will definitely see for liquidity. So, when I am telling that he is going to invest in the market, he is looking for investments wherein which can be liquidated as and when they are required. So, the mutual funds, what they do is they pool the funds and they are going to invest those funds into marketable securities, right. So, that is for liquidity purpose. The investor's share is denominated by units whose value is called as net asset value, which changes every day. So, the way we have for equity, we have stock prices, and as we know, they keep fluctuating every now and then, and the prices keep on changing, right. So, as we have it in equity, the prices, the stock prices. In case of mutual funds, we have a NAV, right, that is called as net asset value. It is nothing but the price of one unit of a mutual fund scheme. Okay. The investment portfolio is created according to the stated investment objective of the fund. So, before I route these funds, before I channelize these funds to certain investments, I have to understand what is the objective of this fund, whether it is for those people who are risk averse, whether it is for people who are risk neutral, whether it is for the people who are risk takers, right. Depending on the risk appetite of the investors who are going to create the pool, I am going to decide what is going to be the objective of this fund. Whether the fund is going to get an exposure in the equity market, whether the fund is going to get an exposure in the debt market, whether it is going to be a balanced exposure. So, depending on what is the objective of the funds are going to be routed. Mutual funds are also known as financial intermediaries. Why? Because they are actually, what they are doing is they are acting as an intermediator. They are an intermediator between Mr. A and the market, right. So, they are just acting as financial intermediaries who are connecting the funds. They are actually passing the funds from the supplier to the seekers, to the companies who need the funds for growth, expansion, modernization, etc. In India, we have mutual funds which are constituted as trust. In India, we have it as trust, whereas in UK and US, it is like a company. So, mutual funds are constituted as a company in US, whereas in India, we have it in the form of a trust. Now, what are the advantages of having mutual funds, friends, for the investor? Firstly, portfolio diversification. Now, what do you mean by portfolio diversification? Is you must have heard about the statement, never put all your eggs in one basket, right. So, you are aware of this. So, what it says is, rather than putting all my investments in one basket, let us assume that Mr. A has parked all his funds in one company. Okay. So, this is a portfolio or this is an investment which has put all the eggs in one basket. Now, when I have all the eggs in one basket, if the basket I am not able to handle the basket properly and it falls from my hand, all the eggs will get destroyed, right. So, all my investments will go haywire. In that case, it becomes very vital for me to think of diversification. Now, what is diversification, friends? In case of investments, rather than putting all your eggs in one basket and being at the mercy of the performance of that particular company, what I can do is, I can spread it across various companies, or I can spread it across various industries, I can spread it across various sectors, right friends? So, rather than putting all my eggs in one basket, what am I doing is, I am putting the eggs in different baskets. So, my eggs are now split up into various baskets. So, my investments are into different companies rather than just one company. So, I have my investments in basket A, B, C, D, E. Now, what happens is, now I am not left at the mercy of the performance of one company, but now I have to watch the performance of at least a portfolio, at least 5 to 10 companies, right, at a stretch. Why? Because what happens is, now when I say there is some correlation existing between these companies, what will happen is, if A is not performing, let's say A and B has a negative correlation between each other. And in case of portfolio diversification, if A is not performing that well, at least B will be able to compensate the losses which has been incurred through A, right. Similarly, C can compensate the losses in D, or D can compensate the losses in E, whatever. So, what we say is, portfolio diversification talks about spreading your risk. So, your risk gets mitigated once you diversify your portfolio. So, when I diversify my portfolio, I spread my investments across various companies or various industries, I am able to get good returns, keeping my risk at a minimum level. That is what is portfolio diversification talking about. Coming to professional management. Now, what do you mean by professional management, friends? As I said earlier, Mr. A might not be having that good expertise, that good knowledge about the markets. He doesn't know the intricacies of the market. He doesn't know when to enter and when to exit the market. He doesn't have the proper timing of entering the market. In such a scenario, these professionals, the fund managers from the mutual funds, can be a savior to him. Why? Because they have the professional expertise. So, mutual funds, what is the advantage which mutual funds has? They are professionally managed. There are a set of people, qualified people, right, who are there in the market. They are there to guide the investors and they are there to allocate the funds in the right way. That is the reason we say there is professional management in case of mutual funds. There is reduction in risk, as I have already said. When I diversify, rather than putting all my eggs in one basket, when I am going to spread it over various industries, my risk is getting mitigated. So, diversification basically helps me to reduce my risk. Then reduction in transaction cost, as I am not entering the equity market directly, I don't have to pay any margins, I need not pay any transaction cost, right? I need not pay any I need not keep any securities with the brokers. I don't have to incur any broker expenses. All these things will be cut down if I am doing an investment through a mutual fund. And then I have the liquidity in hand. As we have it in equity, I can go and I can check out with my broker, I can sell my shares and get the funds back to me. In the similar fashion, in case of mutual funds also I have the liquidity. Why? Because I am holding units and the units are tradable in the market. There is a secondary market available for the mutual funds, and what happens is the units are giving me a NAV, so I can decide that when I want to come out of that investment and get my funds back. So, I can convert my securities or my funds into cash whenever it is required. Then it is convenient and flexible. Why convenient? Because there is convenience of investment, right? I can have there is a proper structure and organized structure of mutual funds which help me to conveniently get into mutual fund investment, and they are very flexible. I can shift my funds, from a balanced fund to a growth fund, from growth fund to a liquid fund. So, there I have the flexibility of keeping my funds as per my requirement or as per my choice. And then there is always a safety, the security is always there. Why? Because they are also, the mutual funds are also well regulated by SEBI as well as AMFI. SEBI and AMFI are playing as watchdogs to keep a check on the working of these mutual funds. Right? So these are the advantages of mutual fund investments. Coming to the disadvantages, definitely friends, when we talk about the pros of mutual funds, there are certain cons also which has to be taken as a part and parcel of doing investments in mutual funds. So what are the disadvantages in mutual funds? There is no control over the cost. There are hidden costs. Why? Because they are going to be adjusted in the NAV itself. So I might not, they are not that transparent. I might not be knowing what is the actual cost I am incurring on doing the investments in mutual funds. So the transaction cost may be high in such case. The regulators limit the expenses of mutual funds because now they have, the regulators have brought down the entry and the exit load. So there is no entry and exit load for mutual fund investments. So that way somewhere things are working in the right track. But yes, regulators try to limit these expenses. The fees are paid as percentage of the value of investment. So again, as I said, it will be factored into the NAV itself. So I might not be aware of what is the actual cost I am incurring for doing an investment in the mutual fund. So there are no tailor-made portfolios, friends. Now what do you mean by tailor-made portfolios? The investor, the person whose money is being channelized into the mutual funds, they don't have any control on the, or they don't have the choice of deciding where they want the companies, where they want the fund managers to put their money, right? So they have no control on it. Mutual funds will decide which companies they are going to channelize those funds. So once the pool is created, now it is the nurturing of the pool will be done by the fund manager. The fund manager takes care of the baby then. So then Mr. A will have no control. It cannot be tailored made the way it is done in case of portfolio management services. In portfolio management services, definitely I can decide which companies I would like to invest in. Managing a portfolio of funds, investor has to hold a portfolio for the funds for different objectives. Now what happens is, now let's say I am an investor wherein I have multiple objectives, right? Few funds I want to keep it for long term, I want to park it in equity products, few funds, few of my investments, few of my savings I would like to park it in debt funds, few of the funds, few of my investments I would like to do it in the liquid funds. So for all different objectives I need to have different funds with me, right? So I cannot have one fund which will cater to all my requirements. It cannot fulfill all my objectives at one go. So for every objective which I have, right, for tax purpose or let's say for liquidity purpose, for getting good returns, for various objectives I have to have a kitty of different funds in my investment portfolio. One fund can have schemes of similar objectives, so selection becomes difficult. Now, as we know, there are multiple of schemes available in the market brought in by different fund houses, and the objective of few funds can be similar. Now, even the balanced fund has a similar, let's say, similar type of objective. There is another fund which has a similar type of objective. So then it becomes very difficult for the investor to decide where to park the funds, in which mutual fund will be the right choice for him. Right? So these are the disadvantages which we have in case of mutual funds. Now coming to the classification, friends, very important is to know what are the basic classifications of mutual fund. To start with, what are open-ended funds? You must have heard about open-ended and closed-ended funds. Now what is the basic difference between open-ended funds and closed-ended funds? Now open-ended funds are investors can buy and sell units of the fund at NAV related prices at any time directly from the fund. Now what do you mean by this? When I talk about open-ended, they are open. They are anytime I want to enter into the market, enter into that fund, I can invest, I can buy those units, right? And anytime I want to come out of that investment, I can sell my units. So that is what is open-ended. The buying and selling is flexible, right? In open-ended funds, they are available with a NAV, right? So I can buy and sell as per my requirement.